Somewhere in County Cork, in the spring of 1852, a man named Denis Murphy stood in a field he did not own and watched a stranger measure it. The stranger wrote down the acreage, the yearly value, the landlord's name, and one thing more: the name of the man standing in front of him, the occupier, Denis Murphy. Denis never saw the book it went into. It was a tax ledger, not a census, and it would outlive every census Ireland ever took. That book is called Griffith's Valuation, the Primary Valuation of Ireland, directed by Sir Richard Griffith, and published county by county between 1847 and 1864. It records the occupier of over 1 million holdings across the island. It is the single best census substitute for mid-19th century Ireland, because Ireland's 19th century censuses are gone. For millions of famine-era and pre-famine families, Griffith's is the only national record that carries their name, their townland, and their landlord at all. Before we go on, if you would like to discover everything about your own surname, this one is for you. Not just where your name truly comes from and the DNA story behind it, but some of the most famous people who ever carried it. And a few darker secrets we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Scan the QR code on your screen right now with your phone, or just tap the link in the description below, and there you can get your own personalized 30-page Surname Heritage Report, delivered straight to your inbox. Now, let us get back to the story. Today we walk the great Irish surnames through it. Murphy, Kelly, O'Sullivan, Walsh, Smith, O'Brien, Byrne, Ryan, O'Connor, O'Neill, O'Reilly, Doyle, McCarthy, Gallagher, Doherty, Kennedy, Lynch, Murray, Quinn, and more. Each has a Gaelic root, a county heartland, and a bearer whose name you already know. We separate the Gaelic septs from the Norman and Viking arrivals and the Ulster planter families. And we bring in the Y-DNA evidence, the RM222 signature, and the 2006 Trinity College Dublin study of the Uí Néill that can confirm a deep Gaelic line the paper record only hints at. By the end, you will know how to find your own name in it, for free, down to the acre. But this record story does not really begin in that cork field in 1852. It begins 70 years later in a burning building in Dublin. The fire and the myth about the fire. Ask anyone who knows a little about Irish genealogy, and you tend to get the same sentence. The census burned in the fire, and that is half right, in a way that hides the more painful truth. On the 28th of June, 1922, the Irish Civil War opened with an artillery bombardment of the four courts in Dublin. Inside that complex sat the Public Record Office of Ireland, 7 centuries of documents. On the 30th of June, a massive explosion tore through the record treasury, and charred fragments of paper drifted down over Dublin for miles. Among the losses were the surviving census returns for 1821, 1831, 1841, and 1851. The household records of pre-famine and famine Ireland, the very years the population crashed from over 8 million to about 6.5 million, gone in an afternoon. That is the fire everyone remembers. But it is only half the loss. The censuses of 1861, 1871, 1881, and 1891 were not even in that building. The 1861 and 1871 returns were deliberately destroyed by the government after each count. The 1881 and 1891 returns were pulped during the First World War, reportedly to recover the paper. Somebody signed an order. Somebody fed the household records of an entire nation into a mill. So some of it burned in a war, and some was thrown away on purpose by clerks who decided the names of ordinary Irish families were not worth the shelf space. Between the fire and the pulping, the 19th century censuses were almost entirely erased, leaving a hole the size of the famine across the most important decades in Irish family history. Into that hole falls one book: Why a Tax Book Became a Treasure. Griffith's valuation was never meant to be a family record. Nobody set out to preserve the Irish people. They set out to tax them. Richard Griffith was a geologist and civil engineer, and his job was about money, not memory. Ireland needed a fair basis for local taxation, and to tax land fairly, you first have to value it fairly. So Griffith's teams went out, townland by townland, assessing every plot and building in the country. And because it was a tax valuation, it was precise in a way a census never was. A rate collector has to know which land he is valuing and who is liable to pay. Liability meant the occupier, the person actually working the ground, not the distant landlord. So the record captures the occupier by name, the acreage, the valuation, and the lessor who granted the tenancy, cross-referenced to the Ordnance Survey maps, so each holding carries a map reference. You are not just finding a name in a list. You are finding the actual field. A census would have told you a Murphy household of 7 lived somewhere in a parish. Griffiths tells you Denise Murphy held 4 acres and 2 roods in this townland, under this landlord, on this numbered plot. Over 1 million holdings, a near-complete snapshot of who held the land in the years around the famine. Now let us walk the names. Murphy, the sea warriors of the southeast. We start where we began, with Murphy, the most common surname in all of Ireland, and it always has been. In the Irish, it is O Murchada, from Murchad, which breaks down to Muir, the sea, and Cath, battle. Sea warrior. In Griffiths, Murphy households number around 13,500, concentrated in the southeast, in County Cork, and above all in County Wexford, in the Old Kingdom of Leinster. The bearer you know is Father John Murphy of Boulavogue, the priest who led Wexford rebels in the 1798 Rising, still sung in a ballad more than 2 centuries later. Walk into Griffiths for County Wexford, and you find Murphy after Murphy after Murphy. So many the record keepers had to lean on townlands and landlords to tell them apart. Every one is a household the census would have counted, if the census still existed. It does not, so the tax book counts them instead. Kelly, the Uí Néill of the West. If Murphy is first, Kelly is a close second, and it comes from the west. The Irish is O'Ciala, and the great Kelly sept were the O'Ciala of Uí Néill, a lordship straddling County Galway and County Roscommon in Connacht. They were kings and lords there for centuries, and the name radiated out until Kellys turned up in nearly every county. In Griffiths, the Kelly and O'Kelly entries cluster thickest in that Galway and Roscommon core, exactly where the medieval genealogies say they should be. When an American Kelly finds his people in East Galway in the 1850s, he is looking at the shadow of a kingdom. O'Sullivan, the hawk-eyed of the southwest, now to the far southwest, to Cork and Kerry, and a name that barely strayed from home. O'Sullivan in the Irish O Swileab Hain, from Swiel, the eye, read as hawk-eyed. It is the most common surname in Munster, and here is the detail that ought to stop you. Roughly 3/4 of all O'Sullivans in the record sit in just 2 counties, Cork and Kerry. The O'Sullivans descend from the Eoganacht, the ancient royal kindred of Munster, driven southwest into the peninsulas of Cork and Kerry. The bearer you might reach for is Donal Cam O'Sullivan Bear, who after the fall of Dunboy in 1602, marched 1,000 of his people north through a frozen winter and arrived with only a few dozen survivors. Open Griffiths for the Beara Peninsula, and O'Sullivan repeats down the page like a heartbeat. If your O'Sullivan line is Irish, this southwest corner is almost certainly where the taxman found them. But not every name in this book is Gaelic underneath, and the next one carries the detail most people miss entirely. Walsh, the Briton in the name. Not every great Irish surname is Gaelic. Some arrived with the invaders and became more Irish than the Irish themselves. Walsh is one. The Irish form is Breatnach, meaning, quite literally, the Briton or the Welshman. It marks families who came with the Anglo-Norman invasion of the late 12th century, many of them Welsh soldiers in the Norman host. They spread so widely that Walsh became one of the most common surnames in the country. So a Walsh in Griffiths is usually a family that had been in Ireland for 800 years, but whose very name records the moment they arrived from across the water. Smith, the surname that fools everyone. Pay attention to this next name, because it overturns an assumption almost everyone brings to Irish research. Smith is one of the most common surnames in the English-speaking world, so a Smith in Ireland is assumed to mean English settler blood. In Ulster especially, that feels safe. It is usually wrong. In Ireland, Smith is very often the anglicization of the Gaelic Mac Gabhan, son of the smith, the Gabha being the blacksmith. The Mac Gabhan were a sept centered in County Cavan, in the old territory of East Bryfny. When English record-keeping rolled over Ulster, clerks heard Mac Gabhan, understood Gabha meant smith, and simply translated it. Mac Gabhan became Smith. The same Gaelic line, wearing an English coat. Some Irish smiths do descend from settlers, but a great many, especially around Cavan, are Mac Gabhan underneath, Gaelic to the bone. So if you have an Ulster smith line and assumed it meant a planter, look again. The tax book may be recording a family that had been forging iron in Bryfne for centuries before a clerk changed the spelling. That is the first flag. A surname is a clue, not a verdict. O'Brien, the blood of Brian Boru. Now to Clare and Limerick, and a name that carries a king. O'Brien in the Irish O'Brien means descendant of Brian, and not just any Brian. This is Brian Boru, the High King who broke the power of the Vikings at Clontarf in 1014 and died in the hour of his victory. The O'Briens are his descendants, the ruling dynasty of Thomond in North Munster. In Griffiths, the O'Brien name sits heaviest in exactly that Clare and Limerick heartland, ground their ancestors ruled as kings and later held as Earls of Thomond. Few surnames let you trace a line so directly to a single named High King. It is not proof of royal blood, but it is a very old and very specific pointer. Burn, the Raven of the Mountains. Just south of Dublin, in the Wicklow Mountains, the Burns. The Irish is O'Broin, descendant of Bran, and Bran means raven. The O'Broin were one of the great mountain septs of Leinster. With their neighbors, the O'Tooles, they held the Wicklow Highlands and harried the English colony of the Pale for centuries, famously hard to conquer because the mountains were on their side. In the record, Burn is one of the most common names in Wicklow, still clinging to the Ravens' country, a people who used terrain as a weapon and stayed unbroken long after the lowlands fell. Ryan, the little king of Tipperary. Move to Tipperary and you meet the Ryans. The usual Irish form is O'Ryan from Ryan, read as Little King from Rye. The O'Ryans centered on the borderlands of Tipperary and Limerick, and Ryan became so dominant in County Tipperary that a whole district of Ryans needed nicknames just to tell the families apart. In Griffith's, Ryan floods the Tipperary pages, very likely the ground the valuers walked, when they wrote your ancestor's name beside a plot. O'Connor, the last High Kings. Some names carry a crown. O'Connor carries the last one Ireland ever had. The Irish is O'Conchobair, and the great O'Connor dynasty were the kings of Connaught. Two of them, Turlough and his son Rory, were High Kings of Ireland. Rory O'Connor was the last native High King, reigning when the Normans arrived in 1169. When his power broke, the old Gaelic High Kingship broke with it. In the record, the O'Connor name concentrates in Connaught, in Roscommon and the West. Other O'Connor septs in Kerry, Offaly, and Clare share the spelling, but the Connaught line is the royal one, whose fall marks the end of Gaelic Ireland's independence. O'Neill, the descendants of Niall, and now the name that carries us into the DNA, so hold on to it. O'Neill, in the Irish O'Neill, means descendant of Niall. This is Niall of the Nine Hostages, the semi-legendary High King said to have ruled around the turn of the 5th century, founder of the Uí Néill, the most powerful dynasty of early medieval Ireland. The O'Neills of Tyrone ruled Ulster for centuries and led the last great Gaelic resistance under Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone, in the 9 Years' War. In Griffith's, the O'Neill name sits deep in County Tyrone and across the north. Remember that concentration, because in a few minutes a laboratory in Dublin is going to put a genetic fingerprint on it. O'Reilly, the life of Riley. Next door in County Cavan, the O'Reillys, and a name that slipped into everyday English. The Irish is O'Reilly, the dominant lords of East Bryfney, the same territory as the MacGabhan Smiths. They were reputedly so prosperous that their name entered the language. When someone lives the life of Riley, wanting for nothing, they are invoking the old wealth of the O'Reilly lords of Cavan. In the record, O'Reilly and Riley dominate Cavan. O'Reilly is one of the surnames the Trinity study will link to that Northwest genetic signature. The life of Riley may run deeper in the blood than in the bank. Doyle, the dark foreigner. Another name that is not Gaelic underneath, pointing across the sea. Doyle, in the Irish O Dubh Gael. Break it down, Dubh, dark, and Gaul, foreigner. the dark foreigner. In early medieval Ireland, Dubh Gaul meant the Vikings, specifically the Danes, as opposed to the Fingal, the fair foreigners, who were the Norwegians. Doyle, at its root, means descendant of the Viking. The Doyles concentrate in the southeast, in County Wexford, and along that coast, where Norse settlers had their strongest early presence. So an Irish Doyle very often carries Scandinavian ancestry folded into the Gaelic world 1,000 years ago and more. McCarthy, the Kings of Desmond. Back to Munster and another royal line. McCarthy in the Irish Mac Carthay. The McCarthys were the Kings of Desmond, South Munster, the great rival to the O'Briens after the Eoganacht split. Their heartland is County Cork, and they left their mark most famously at Blarney Castle, built by a McCarthy lord. In Griffiths, McCarthy is one of the great Cork surnames, thick across the county its bearers once ruled. Gaelic royalty reduced to occupiers, their crowns surviving only in the meaning of a name. Gallagher and Doherty, the men of Donegal. Now to the far northwest, to County Donegal, and two names that belong to it almost completely. Gallagher in the Irish O Gaelchabhair, from Gaul, foreigner, and Cabhair, help. The O'Gallaghers were a leading sept of the Cannel Conile, one of the two great branches of the Uí Néill, and marshals of O'Donnell's armies. Gallagher is still one of the most common surnames in Donegal. Doherty in the Irish O Docharte, a byname read as hurtful or obstructive, the kind a warrior kindred wore with pride. The O'Dohertys were lords of Inishowen until Cahir O'Doherty's rebellion in 1608 ended their lordship. Doherty is overwhelmingly a Donegal name. Both are Uí Néill names of the Northwest, and both appear on the list the Trinity study will link to the RM222 signature. Kennedy, the kin of Brian Boru and a president. Kennedy in the Irish O Sinead, descendant of Senetig. And here is the connection. Senetig was the father of Brian Boru. The O'Kennedys are kin to the O'Briens, the same Dalgleish kindred of North Munster, their heartland county Tipperary. The bearer needs no introduction. President John F. Kennedy's Irish roots trace to Dunganstown in County Wexford, where his great-grandfather Patrick Kennedy lived before emigrating in the famine years. When President Kennedy visited Ireland in June 1963, he took tea with his cousins at that homestead. Search Griffiths for the Kennedy name there, and you are walking the same ground. A president's line, kin to a high king, traceable today to the exact townland. This is what the record makes possible. If you are tracing one of these names yourself, subscribe. This channel works through the records and the genetic evidence behind Anglo and Irish family lines every week. Because alongside the Gaelic septs, another set of families was written into this valuation. Names that look Gaelic and are not, and names that look English and are not. That is where the record starts to mislead people. The names that deceive. Now the flags, because some of these names look Gaelic and are not, and some look English and are not. Start with Lynch, which is not one name but two. The first is Norman de Lench, who came with the Anglo-Norman settlement and became one of the 14 tribes of Galway that ran the city for centuries. The second is purely Gaelic, O Loing Sai, from long meaning mariner, a native Irish line found in Ulster and elsewhere. A Galway Lynch and an Ulster O Loingsai share nothing but the anglicized spelling, and only the documented trail can tell them apart. Murray carries the same trap, pointed north. The Gaelic origin is O Muiriad Haig, found across Connaught and beyond. But many Ulster Murrays are Scots, descendants of the Scottish Murrays, who came during the plantation of Ulster in the 1600s, their name tracing to Moray in the north of Scotland. That plantation is the root of the whole problem. In the early 1600s, after the flight of the Earls, the English crown planted Ulster with settlers from England and lowland Scotland, whose surnames then sat alongside Gaelic families whose own names had been anglicized into forms that looked English. So in Ulster, a surname can be Gaelic or settler, and the name alone will not tell you which. Moore is the sharpest example. It has a proud Gaelic origin in O'Morda, the leading sept of the seven septs of Lewis, who resisted plantation through the 1500s, and whose Rory O'More helped lead the rebellion of 1641. But many other Moors are English or Scots settlers named Moore or Moore, planted like so many others. The tax book records the name. It cannot record the bloodline behind it, which is why the record is a beginning, not an end. Because there is one kind of record that does read the bloodline directly. It does not care how a clerk spelled your name. It reads what fathers passed to sons, unbroken, for 16 centuries. The ancestry you have been reading off a surname is not the full picture. The Laboratory in Dublin. In February of 2006, a paper appeared in the American Journal of Human Genetics with a title that sounds more like history than science. It was called A Y Chromosome Signature of Hegemony in Gaelic Ireland. Led by Lewis Moore and the geneticist Daniel Bradley at the Smurfit Institute of Genetics, Trinity College, Dublin. The Y chromosome passes from father to son, largely unchanged. So does a Gaelic surname. In theory, name and chromosome should travel together down the centuries. And if an old dynasty really did father a great many sons, who founded a great many families, you should see the echo of it in the DNA of living men. The Trinity team tested Y chromosome samples from 800 Irish men and found something striking. A single distinctive signature, now known as RM222, appeared at high frequency in the Northwest. Across the island, roughly 8% of men carried it. But in the Northwest, the old Uí Néill heartland, the figure rose to about 21%. 1 man in 5. Then they looked at which surnames the carriers had. The signature clustered with names from the Uí Néill dynastic zone. O'Neill, Gallagher, Doherty, O'Reilly, Quinn, Flynn, Egan, O'Donnell. The very families the medieval genealogies say descend from the Uí Néill, in the very region we just saw them fill in Griffiths, in Tyrone and Donegal and Cavan. Bradley made the comparison out loud. It reminded the team of a study in Central Asia, where about 8% of men shared a Y chromosome, later linked to Genghis Khan. A single prolific patriarch, fathering a lineage across a huge population. The best candidate in Ireland, the team suggested, was Niall of the Nine Hostages, founder of the Uí Néill, the High King whose descendants took his name. So think about what this means. Griffiths shows you the paper shadow of a dynasty, O'Neill's packed into Tyrone, Gallagher's and Doherty's filling Donegal, O'Reilly's dominating Cavan. The Trinity study shows the same dynasty written in living blood, in the same northwest ground, carried by the same surnames. The tax book and the laboratory, a century and a half apart, point at the same families. The honest caveat, because you would catch it anyway. If I stopped there, some of you would rightly push back, so let us stay honest. The RM222 signature does not prove that every man who carries it descends from Néill personally. Later analysis of its diversity suggests the founding father may have lived a millennium or more before the traditional date for Néill, and some historians question whether Néill was a single historical person at all, rather than a name attached to a dynasty's origin story. But what the study shows is remarkable enough without overreaching. A large group of men, concentrated in the northwest, carrying a cluster of related Gaelic surnames, share a common male line ancestor. Why DNA and Gaelic surnames really do travel together down the generations. The Uí Néill were not just a legend in the annals. They were a real, prolific, genetic reality you can still measure in Irish and diaspora men today. Whether you hang the name Néill on it is where the science turns, carefully, into story. Now find your own name. Here is the part that turns all of this from a history lesson into your history. Griffith's valuation is completely free to search. A website run in Ireland called Ask About Ireland holds the entire primary valuation, searchable by surname and, crucially, mapped. Type in a surname, filter by county and parish, and you get back the occupiers, the townlands, the acreage, the valuation, and the landlord. Because it was tied to the Ordnance Survey maps, you can often see the exact plot, the very field your ancestor rented. Say you are a Murphy whose people came from County Wexford in the famine years. Search Murphy, narrow to a Wexford parish, and in minutes you are looking at a named occupier, an acreage, a landlord, and a numbered plot on the map. Most videos tell you the record exists. They do not tell you that you can hold your ancestors' field in your hand tonight. For nothing, you can. And you can walk the paper trail and the DNA trail together. If your surname is one of those Uí Néill names, an O'Neill, a Gallagher, a Doherty, an O'Reilly, a Quinn, and you have tested your Y DNA, look at whether you carry RM222. If you do, you are holding the same signature the Trinity team measured in 2006. The record gives you the field. The DNA gives you the bloodline. Together, something close to proof. Close, but not the same thing. And that difference is worth being precise about. What the record is and what it is not. Two honest limits stated plainly. First, Griffiths lists householders, not every individual. It records the occupier liable for the rates, not the wives, the children, or the laborers under that roof. So when you find one Murphy or one O'Sullivan, you are finding the head of a household that may have held a dozen souls. That is the price of a tax valuation and not a true census. Second, and carry this one above all others, a surname is not proof of a line. Smith can be Mac Gabhan or English planter. Lynch can be de Lench or O'Loingsai. Murray can be O Muiriadhai or Scots settler. Walsh carries a Briton in its meaning, Doyle a Viking. The name is a clue, never the verdict. To claim a line, you use the record plus the documented trail, the baptisms, the wills, the tombstones, the ship manifests, and where you can, the DNA. The surname opens the door. The evidence walks you through it, which is why Griffith's is a starting point and not a finish line. But what a starting point it is. The field that outlived the fire go back one last time to Dennis Murphy in his 4 acres in the spring of 1852, watching a stranger measure his ground. Everything conspired to erase him. The famine scattered his people across the ocean. The census that should have counted his household burned in the 4 courts in 1922, or was pulped by clerks who thought his name was worthless. His own descendants would not know the townland he came from. And yet, because a tax official once needed to know who was liable for the rates on a plot of land, Dennis Murphy survived. Not the man himself, but the record of him, his name, his acreage, his landlord, his exact field, preserved in the one book that made it through the fire and the pulping mills, now on a free website where his great-great-grandchildren can find him in minutes. That is the strange grace of Griffith's valuation. It was never meant to remember anyone. It was meant to tax them. But in a country where so much of the record was burned in a war and thrown away on purpose, the tax book became the memory. For the Gaelic septs reduced to tenants and the diaspora scattered across 3 continents, it is the one national record that says, "For free, you were here, and this was your ground." Your family name may be in it. The field may still be on the map, and now you know exactly where to look. If a name in this video sent you searching, and you found your own people in the record, put it in the comments. Tell us the surname and the county. This channel traces exactly these lines: the Gaelic septs, the planter families, the genetic evidence beneath the diaspora, one name at a time.